Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Guardian Druids and Season 4. So there's a lot of new stuff coming in Season 4. You have the Dinar vendor. I'm going to talk about what you might want to prioritize buying there. We're going to talk about Season 4 gearing, right? New dungeons, some interesting things coming back. Anything you want to keep an eye out, I'll mention all those things. We're going to talk about the Shrouded Affix, how that's going to work for Guardian Druids, what stat you're going to be focusing on. I'll briefly touch on Covenant stuff, though that hasn't changed since Season 3. My Season 3 video is going to be much more in-depth on the Covenant stuff. I'm not going to go too deep into it because it hasn't really changed. And similarly, I'll talk Legendaries, again, that big UFR versus Legacy debate. I'll give you guys my take on that. Remember though, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video. Going to be putting out my simple routes soon, as well as kind of refresher videos, kind of going through all the abilities, interrupts, stops, purges, dispels, all those things for the new dungeon in Season 4, so be on the lookout for those. And let's talk, starting off with the Dinars. So, obviously the vendors are not here on live just yet, but basically how these Dinars work is you're going to get a little quest here. There it is. So basically you're going to get this quest when you zone into a raid. You got to kill 30 faded raid bosses. And this is unique to the raid boss. It doesn't matter what difficulty you kill them on. You just need 30 kills total. So it's going to take you 3 weeks, seeing as you only get 10 this week, 10 next week, 11 the week after, based on the number of bosses. And once you get this, the next one will be 20, and the one after will be 10. So you'll be able to get this quicker as the season goes on. And this will give you 1 dinar. You get 3 dinars total to buy an item from the vendors, and basically the vendors sell weapons, trinkets, and unique effect items. You'll then be able to upgrade these items to a higher item level later, because when you buy them, they are normal eye level, so that's 278 to 285 depending on the item. And then if you run heroic or mythic, you'll get a bunch of these items. Like I have a few in my bag, these ancient ciphers. You have 20 of these ciphers. You're able to upgrade 1 item. This one is mythic. Heroic is the same deal though. You'll get 21 per boss, and you'll be able to upgrade it to heroic eye level quality in that way as well. So that's how you're going to catch up your gear, or that's how you're going to basically select your gear that you really want, and maybe you're having a little bit of trouble getting. Now, what exactly is that going to be? Let's open up a nice little paint. Paint is good. All right, we got paint. We got paint. All right, so you got a couple things. So one, it's going to be very relevant whether you're doing Mythic Plus, raiding, and to what degree you're doing those things. If you want to push high keys, for example, there's definitely a trinket you want to pick up. If you don't really care, you're doing like weekly 15s, even like 20s, and you're like, nah, I just want to blast and do damage, maybe you want to go for a different trinket. So I'll lay those out for you here, but there is unfortunately an elephant in the room. The very first thing you're going to pick up is Gavel. Yeah, Gavel, the strength weapon from the jailer. Yeah, that's how good it is. It's just the best. It's just the best. A little unfortunate, but yeah, it's weird. It is what it is. Might want to get a Gavel week or two if you're running Gavel. But yeah, technically our best weapon is Gavel, and because of the difficulty for Guardian Druids to acquire Gavel, seeing as we can't even loot it ourselves, yeah, Gavel is definitely going to be your first buy. Now, if you are protesting for whatever reason, you don't want to buy Gavel, you have a couple other weapon options. There is, of course, Jotun from the 9. You can get that weapon. Gavel's still better. Jotun is nice, especially if you're playing Venthyr a lot, right? Lines up with Venthyr. There's no like CDR now anymore, so from and stuff, so it won't desync it, so that's nice. And if you're like, hey, I don't want any part of these on-use weapons, instead you can get Zovastrum. I call it Zova, which is the jailer weapon. So that's just the highest eye level weapon that you can get that isn't Gavel. Smile. So those are your weapon choices. Again, Gavel is clearly the best. And then you kind of have trinket choices. So from here on, raid trinkets are king. None of the new dungeon trinkets are really great for tanks in particular. There are a couple maybe niche ones that might be good for guardians. Specifically, I'll mention those later. But you're going to be hunting trinkets here 100%, and you're probably going to wear them the whole tier because, again, raid trinkets are just king. Specifically, Sanctum of Domination trinkets are very, very strong, right? Both Reactive Defense Matrix and Aegis saw use last tier at a reduced eye level, so here you're going to be able to get them at max eye level. They're going to be good. I would say RDM is probably going to be your second choice here for a couple of reasons. One, it's like great generic trinket to equip, whether you're raiding, mythic plussing, it doesn't really matter. It's always going to be strong. It's going to do decent damage. It's going to be great defensively. And it drops from one of the later bosses, right? This is a post-Painsmith boss. If your guild doesn't have the skip, if your guild's going to struggle on Painsmith, that kind of thing, this is going to be a good buy, especially if you're comparing it to Aegis, which drops off the third boss of the raid instance. It's probably going to be fairly easy to even pug that on mythic difficulty and get your shot at that. So definitely would recommend RDM here. Going for your third and final Dinar again here. Assuming you don't get any of these, my recommendation for most players is Cache. Cache of Acquired Treasures. Again, big damage. Synergy with your Incarn. There's no CDR anymore, like I mentioned previously with Jotun, so it lines up with Incarn. But in that same vein, there is some anti-synergy with Jotun if that's the weapon you're choosing to go with. So be careful in that sense a little bit. And this is just really, really fantastic damage, Mythic Plus, and raiding. Now, if you are looking to push high keys, I wouldn't recommend Cache. Instead, I would actually recommend here going for Aegis from Sanctum. Again, third boss, the 9 is who drops Aegis. This one is obviously going to be probably easier to obtain. This drops off Zymox, which is an early boss, but most people don't do him too early, and it's probably a little less pug friendly than the 9. The 9 is going to be very puggable, I think, even on mythic difficulty. But again, on very high keys, if you're pushing high keys, you are going to be running Aegis for sure. It's just way too powerful defensively, and the cash damage is less significant for sure. And again, this can change up. You know, maybe you do Guardian once, you get an RDM, right? If you get an RDM on like normal or heroic, you don't need to buy it anymore, right? Because you can just upgrade it to whatever you need. So you don't need to waste the Dinar. You can now buy Cash and Aegis if you want them, and that kind of thing. You could buy these other weapons if you want to, you know, maybe Gavel gets nerfed. It's not looking likely. They also said they didn't really want to nerf weapons into the season after people had spent Dinars, but, you know, maybe he gets nerfed in the next week or two before people get one. We'll see. But these are likely the things you're going to want to buy. Gavel, RDM, and then Cash if you're raiding or doing mid-level keys. Aegis if you're trying to push high-level keys. And that's going to suit you pretty well for the season. Speaking of other stuff in Season 4 gearing. Now, there is some... Let's look at the dungeons real quick. There are the primary statted rings and necklaces from Brimrail. I don't think these are going to be worthwhile. You're losing out on a metric ton of secondary stats by doing this, and I don't think the primary value actually overcomes that. I'll post an update if that changes, but for now, I actually don't think these are worthwhile. In terms of the other rings from Mechagon, similarly, where are they? These may be okay with like the if you use 3 different spells and abilities ring, and then maybe the haste proc ring for like damage. But again, the stats are a little weird, right? It's crit haste and then haste mastery, so you're missing out on some good stats here on your rings, which is a little bit weird for tanks. And of course, you can't use the really, really good one, which is the if you're behind an enemy. That's the one all the DPSers and stuff use. Maybe good for pure damage stuff. Probably again not really what you're aiming for. Hirazane has a couple potentially interesting trinkets to Guardian Druids. They're pretty good back in Legion, you know, back in the day. There's the Relaxing Ruby here. Procs off your Moonfire. Leaves a Flame Wreath. Does good AoE and not terrible single target. And the Curator also has the Deteriorated Construct Core. This actually has primary stat on it, shoots orbs. Basically, though, we're not Moonbear yet. Obviously, that's going to be a thing in Dragonfight, but that was something we were in Legion and maybe helped the proc rate of these trinkets a fair bit. And obviously, these are nerfed specifically for melee characters because they're meant for ranged characters. In the patch notes recently, it did mention that these were going to be nerfed specifically for melee characters. So maybe need some testing. Again, pure damage options for sure, but maybe something to have on your radar as potential options. And maybe you see a drop, no one needs it, keep it, maybe it's decent. But likely not something you're going to be using, right? Like I said, RDM, Cash, Aegis, hard to try and deviate from those three because they are so strong for Guardian Druids. If we're talking about the Shrouded Affix itself, so of course there's going to be these guys kind of randomly, well, not actually random, it's static throughout the dungeon. It looks like they are giving count now. They weren't giving count on PTR, but it looks like they do give count now, but it's different count. So the Dreadlords and the mini boss give their own set count, different than the count that of the mob they took the place of, basically. But basically, when you kill one of these guys, it either gives you 1 stack for the regular Dreadlords or 3 stacks for the big mini boss guy. And those stacks give you stats, which you can pick at the beginning of a dungeon. And right off the bat here, guys, versatility is bait. Do not take versatility. You get half the amount of stats picking versatility than picking anything else. So do not pick that. Not worth it. Your best bet here is for sure to take haste. Haste is going to give you the biggest benefit, and then potentially because of that, you want to gear a little bit more towards crit and versatility now because you're going to be getting so much haste, but it's not going to be the end of the world if you're still gearing more haste versatility. But I think because you're going to be taking haste from this guy, crit's going to gain a little bit more value in terms of gearing just because you're going to have so much haste, and you do want to be a little bit more balanced. That's a very minor thing. Let's talk Covenants, though. Covenants. So, nothing has changed with Covenants for Season 3, so if you want that more in-depth Soulbind breakdown, all that kind of stuff, check out my Season 3 video. I'll link that down below. But basically, if you're pugging and you're not doing the highest level of keys, Venthyr is your go-to. Very strong personal damage. Lines up with things like Cash. Your Incarn window is basically just massive. You can run Nadia or Theotar if you think you can get good Umbrella uptime. Draven is bait, so stay away from that. If you're looking at the highest level of keys, Kyrian is going to see a lot of play, I think. It's very, very strong. So I played last season because I had a Windwalker, but they were a little more scarce last season. They're going to be very, very strong this season again, so I think you're going to see a lot more pop up. But specifically, Kyrian bonded to a Windwalker. You get a lot of team damage. You can line up your bonds with their Bone Dust Bruise, and it gives Guardian a decent amount of more strength outside of Incarn, which is very important in those higher keys. Night Phase is just going to be kind of a niche pick for raids. It's basically like single target defensive, so if you need defense for any reason, Night Phase plus Naya is quite strong, but Venthyr is definitely going to be the play for damage and specifically for dungeons just in general if you want to be doing that kind of stuff. So Night Phase, very niche. You can play it if you want, but Venthyr is definitely going to be better for dungeons and damage. And that kind of brings us to the legendary situation, or, you know, for Mythic Plus, Legacy versus UFR. Which one should you play? And which one is better? And that depends. So, there is no blanket statement better here. I think if I were to give you a blanket statement of this one is just better always, it would be completely incorrect because I play both. I play both on high keys. My preference, though, is definitely to be playing Legacy. It lets you do significantly more damage. The defensive difference is actually not as significant as you would expect. You're already extremely tanky during Incarn. You need to play a little bit differently, right? Use Frenzied Regens more often, but it's actually just fine. You get a ton of Leech as well during Incarns. And of course, on things like Tyrannical Week, it gives you a ton more boss damage. Of course, always amping your 4-piece and any damage you do during Incarn. So if you see Tyrannical Weeks, I will tend to pretty much favor Legacy of the Sleeper for damage. And specifically things like Necrotic Week and that kind of stuff is when UFR will get taken out. Some Fort Weeks, depending on the dungeon, I will use UFR. But the big thing is here, UFR is just significantly safer. right? If you're not worried about your damage, which if you're doing like 15 keys, you're doing 20 keys, your damage is not really too important for the sake of timing the key. As long as you're doing average stuff, you're going to be just fine. And in those kind of situations, you're much better playing the safer option, which is UFR. UFR is significantly safer than Legacy of the Sleeper for sure. Is it necessary? No, especially if you're playing Kyrian, because again, that Kyrian strength between your incarns is also very, very helpful, and something that you can pair with Legacy of the Sleeper to also gain the advantage of your cooldown, right? Because if you're playing Legacy of the Sleeper with Venthyr, you will still hold your incarn for your Ravenous Frenzy. You're missing out on a little bit of a benefit there from the Legendary, but it's not a ton. Overall, though, the main thing to take away from this is if you're pugging and you're not doing the highest keys, UFR is a very safe option. It's also really, really strong against Necrotic. If you're doing very, very high keys, if you need damage or you want damage for whatever reason, tyrannical keys in particular, Legacy is a very good option, and the option that I personally prefer using when pushing keys. That's it though, guys. Hopefully this answered a lot of your questions about Season 4 and Guardian Druids. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions at all about any of this stuff. I'll do my best to answer. You can also stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I do all the Season 4 keys. I'm spamming keys every day, doing faded raids. Alpha stuff as well is going to be coming, so check me out. Come say hi. It's a fun time. Otherwise though, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.